I've always loved being outside and loved being with nature. From the time I was little, I asked for a spot in the yard to garden in the suburbs, and neither of my parents were gardeners. I don't know if any farmers in recent generations or scientists in recent generations. But I guess that's where I think it really began, was just loving to be outside and to be observing nature. And I got my undergrad a little bit late in my 20s. I studied horticulture and soils because I loved plants. My husband and I at one time had a dream of having an apple orchard. And so I came to the university to study apples. And I liked the program. I liked learning a lot. If you had told me as a kid that I was going to get a degree in science, I would have laughed. I was more of an artist. I've considered myself that growing up. But I guess once I started taking classes, I realized that there was not a real line between arts and sciences for me, that they were kind of one and the same. I don't see a big definition from subject to subject. So I guess I don't know how but it was really the dream of having an apple orchard that pushed me over into declaring a degree in horticulture. And I got a minor in soils just because I found it fascinating and had to take a couple extra classes. And then late in my degree program, I had to take some entomology classes. And one of them was an overview of entomology, the whole department. It was like every 2 weeks we had a different professor. And it was really fun. I got to learn about butterflies, and I got to learn about cockroaches, and I got to learn about all different things. And when Marla Spivak came and taught 2 weeks on honeybees, my mind was really opened. Social insects I think are really fascinating, but there's something about honeybees was really touched my humanity, I guess. And I needed an internship as part of my undergrad degree. And I asked Marla if I could do the internship in her lab, which didn't make any sense, even though, because I was in the horticulture department. But I just wanted to do some more with bees. And besides that, I decided to take an extra 5,000 level class, honeybee biology and management with Marla. I didn't need it for my degree, but I really wanted to take it. And I think if I had taken that earlier, I probably would have switched majors. But so I did an internship for Marla, working for her first PhD student, Becky Masterman, who had actually developed an allergy to her research. And so I did a lot of data generating for her. And I really liked the lab. I liked working for Marla. I liked working with Becky. I liked Gary. I liked all the people in the lab, and I just loved working with honeybees. It just clicked. So I graduated with horticulture and soils, but that internship in the lab just turned into a job for about 4 years. So I was just a lab tech. So I did 20% lab work, maybe, most 80% field work. And I worked really closely with Gary Reuter, who's sort of infamous in the bee world. And I learned most of what I know from him, proud to say. And so it turned into a career path that I really didn't see coming. And my husband and I decided to stay in Minneapolis where we were living instead of moving out and moving to the outer ring suburbs and having a orchard. We were thinking about kids, and we started to realize that we really wanted to raise them in town, where they could walk to school, walk up to the store, make friends of all kinds. And we just kind of got shy of people with 30 acres of mown grass lawns. And so that was kind of our decision to stay out of that dream of owning an orchard. And then it allowed me to just continue working for the university and working with bees. And when I was working with Gary, he one day came to work and said, hey, you got elected to be secretary of the Minnesota Hobby Beekeepers Association last night, even though I wasn't at the meeting. So I got elected to that group. And that was really fascinating and fun. A lot of old-time beekeepers that were part of that group. So I went, I was game. I showed up at the next meeting, and I was secretary for 2 years, and then I was vice president for 2 years, and then I was president of that organization for a couple of years. And that kept me in with beekeepers and stuff, even when I quit working for the Bee Lab for a time when we adopted our first child. So we adopted 2 boys, and I was home with kids for about 9 or 10 years. And then back in 2011, my mom died suddenly, and I just started to think about what I've had a lot of loss in my life, and so you know, I'm often struck of like, you know, time and getting what you want done in the time you have, and that was another moment in my life when my mom died, where I just took just made me reflect on my time. I think I had just turned 40, and it was just, you know, one of those periods in life where you just can't help but reflect on where you're at and where you're going, and it made me just realize like I still have work I really want to do, and so I took a couple weeks formulating an email to Marla to see if she'd take me back, like temp and casual. And sent the email off, and she responded about 3 minutes later saying, "We'd love to have you." So then I went back part-time for the lab, and it's been really a fun time to be part of the lab, really an exciting time. So the part of the lab that I work for is called Bee Squad, and we do a variety of programming. We're sort of the extension arm of the lab. Actually, 2 people that work for us work under the extension branch of the university, but we do a lot of public outreach, a lot of education. We interface with the public a lot. We work, we've got commercial clients, and we've got private clients that we keep bees for. We promote honeybees and native bees, and there's a lot of programs. It's been a really fun time to be part of the lab. Dreaming up all the possibilities and ways that we can make a difference for bees. Mm-hmm.
So your parents weren't gardeners, so this whole outdoor thing is like a mutant mutiny.
It is a little.
You receive any imprints from your parents, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think my dad, he loved photography and poetry, and so I know he did take a lot of pictures of nature, you know, 70s style stuff. We'd go out to Red Lodge, and he'd take pictures of the mountain flowers, and, you know, and he wrote a lot of poetry, and it was, I don't want to say hokey, but, you know, sweet, and often had nature themes in it. So I think he had an appreciation for that. Yeah, I mean, my mom potted impatiens. That's about as far as, you know, her hands in the dirt kind of thing went. We had a greenhouse in the house that I grew up in. It was kind of a funny, it was on the 2nd story, and I'm guessing it was like maybe 14 by 12 foot, so it was a good sized greenhouse, and we basically just, our cats hung out in there a lot. My mom would bring the geraniums in the wintertime, but I loved spending time in that greenhouse in the winter and just seeing green plants growing even when there was snow outside. And it would get super hot. It had, you know, a roof that lifted up to let the heat out in the summertime. But I always had dreams of like using that thing for what it was worth, and really, you know, growing food in there. And so I don't know if maybe that greenhouse actually had an imprint on me too, now that I think about it. Yeah, I guess I did. We actually, my husband and I put kind of a greenhouse on our first house that we owned in the back.
Yeah, it's getting easier to do greenhouse with
Mm-hmm.
high technology, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my folks would have killed for that possibility, but it was just glass.
Yeah.
And stuff. I grew up as the son of a very fine gardener, mother, and a gardener wannabe father.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the puzzles of my entire life was, what is it that she knows in her bones that I just don't get?
Yeah.
Because she would go out and work so hard with the vegetables and the flowers, and I just couldn't motivate myself.
Yeah.
So since I no longer have my mom to ask that question of, I want to ask it of you, what grabbed you?
What grabbed her?
What made you want to be in the garden?
I got a strawberry plant at a church sale once with a friend when I was in second grade, and that's when I asked for my own real garden plot in our yard, and I grew tomatoes and green beans from seed. What else did I grow? I grew the strawberries. I think I tried to grow carrots unsuccessfully that year. We had 2 golden retrievers though that would hang out with me when I'd weed, and when the strawberries came, I gave them strawberries to eat, and unfortunately taught them to eat strawberries. And so you would find the little, you'd find the strawberry leaves all over the walkway because I taught the dogs how to go in there and they'd bite them off clean.
Yeah. And, the other strain early on, this sort of the road not taken, is this artistic thing. How did that start and where to go? Is it anywhere now?
Yeah, I play music now. I don't do any creative writing. I used to do a lot of writing in high school. I was voted, Shining Shakespeare in the yearbook my senior year. My friend and I revitalized like an old 60s arts periodical that had been published at our high school, and in the late 80s we brought it back to life. So at that time I thought I was going to be a writer, I think. And I always liked music. And so I continue to play music. I have a lot of friends that are artists. I like to support the arts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then on the list of things you aren't doing, there's apples.
Right.
About 20 years ago, I did an apple interview over this way with Nick Jordan.
Okay.
And one of the things he told me was that it's really hard to grow organic apples in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so what my other friends who are into sustainability tell me is that if your apples aren't organic, you have to put a whole bunch of chemicals on them to make them go.
Yeah.
And so, the war between the little bugs and
Right.
and the fruit growers emerges. When
Right.
you were dreaming about an apple orchard, were you bumping up against those sustainability issues?
We wanted to have an organic orchard, and we visited a couple of them. And then some of the pushback we got was from some of the conventional growers in the area. We had our business plan actually had a whole kind of arts component too. We were going to put in a natural amphitheater and have concert series in the fall. And so we were going to tie the arts into that business. But we were planning on an organic orchard for sure. And either way, they're pretty harsh chemicals that they use in an organic system. I think they can be more acutely toxic to the person applying them, from what I understand. I don't know how much has changed in the last 20 years. I haven't kept up on what it takes to grow apples. But it is really tough. I think apples are in the dirty whatever 15. There's strawberries and apples and some of the produce that takes a lot of inputs chemically to produce on any large scale. I think, yeah.
Well, how did you imagine? I'm thinking now before bees became the center of your world.
Yeah.
And how did you imagine the relationship between the orchard you were doing with the little amphitheater and, you know, this kind of, I mean, it sounds like something that just kind of glows out of a certain kind of children's book.
Right.
Madeline L'Engle would have just that sort of orchard.
Right.
Crosswicks. But how did you think about the relationship between the trees you wanted to do and the environment you wanted to have, and all the little bugs that were running around in the in the grass and flying and pollinating things?
Right. I don't think I really saw those things at odds, if that's what you mean. Like,
Yeah.
um,
What did you think about it? Was the kind of question. Did you think about this as a home for insects that also raised apples, or?
I think I saw it more as just a chance to work really hard in life and make something really cool. Is what I wanted to do at that time. I mean, I still want to do that, but I think, in my 20s, I saw it as like, this could be, my life's work, and to create something really neat over time.
So the integrated orchard as a work of art.
Yeah. Like, part of our business plan was even to have, foreign exchange students from the university. We would have, we wanted to have things with the community that we were in. We wanted to have, resident artists come and stay. We had a lot of ideas of how to bring people there and have a lot of creative possibilities, as well as a beautiful orchard and, growing food.
I know people like that. I know people who've done almost exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
Some in Austria and some here. And it's a wonderful thing to do. If you
Yeah.
pull it off. They're very, very happy people. But you got sidetracked to bees.
Yeah, I got sidetracked to bees.
Tell me what it was that interested you about bees.
They're just beautiful, and they're so cute at the same time, and they're all doing something. And each individual is fascinating, and all the jobs that they do, and the personality of each hive is a different experience every time you open one up. I think actually the concept of the superorganism really put me over the edge as far as my love for bees, and seeing how an individual is part of a whole, and the wonders that a group can do together. The cooperative working, cooperative living, cooperative raising your brood, and the whole idea of a superorganism is really fascinating.
So, the personality of the hive, this is a notion I've never heard before. Can you say more about it?
Well, it just, if you look at a hive of bees as, the superorganism itself, each one is unique. Genetically, everything is each is unique. I mean, you can run an experiment and try to have replicated hives that have similar experiences, but each one is going to be unique. Not the exact same number of male to female. There's going to be differences in every hive, and each one is going to have a little bit different personality. And the personality can be a reflection of where they are health-wise, where they are environmentally, but also just genetically. A hive is going to show a different personality. I mean, people could say the word mean bees, but we like to say defensive, and that can be a good thing if they're defensive. And some are more defensive than others. They all have a little bit different hum, a little bit different personality.
Well, I can imagine there are probably a lot of people in the world who really like the idea of bees,
Yeah.
who probably wouldn't last half a day actually working with them.
Mm-hmm.
What's I think, I think probably I'm one of those. I bet the first bee person I interviewed wanted to do it in the middle of about 1 million of the things out in the field in order to prove that bees were nice. And what we proved essentially is that bees are patient up to about 56 minutes in a 58-minute interview. The last 2 minutes were quite difficult.
Did you get stung?
No, but they began to explore the space between my eyes and my glasses with considerable interest.
Okay.
And I decided I would terminate the interview a little early and find a way to
Wrap
feel
it up.
because it was just
Yeah.
anyhow. I'm probably not the sort of person who's going to get cooked by the day-to-day working with a hive.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to even join that beekeepers. I have a beekeeper in my family, but I don't think I'm going to join that beekeepers organization.
Yeah.
So what is it about, I mean, apart from the idea, what is it, what's the day-to-day like, and why is that something that you enjoy?
I think, it's sort of like people that work with horses or goats. They're just, you like the animals. And I see it as that, like, a really easy way for me to feel in touch with my humanity. And I don't know, like, I was the first person to do Beer to Bees at the fair back in the 90s. Gary and I did that. Now we do it every year.
What is this?
The Beer to Bees.
Oh.
When we wear a beer to bees.
Yes.
Just for fun. And we did it, we had a lot of motivation to do it, and basically just to get people talking about bees was why we did it. But over time doing it, I sort of feel like it is to show, it's a good demonstration of the relationship that humans have with bees, and that we can kind of do this trick. And it's sort of like taking your dog, to a dog show to show the tricks you could do, or to, it's working your animal and showing what you can do with your animal.
I have a little trouble getting around the fact that they're so small. Is that in terms of
right.
getting personal with them? I mean, how is that?
Well, that's where you look at them as a superorganism.
So
that they don't survive on their own. They're not an individual that survives very long on their own. They need their sisters. They need their queen. In order to move into the future and to do anything, they need each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you start off, the first part of your story is lab tech kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? You said it was, what, 80% field work?
Yeah, about that.
What's the field work component like?
At that time, basically just supporting all the research that was happening in the lab. So any bee yards that we had that were part of an experiment, I was helping manage. And there were some grad students that were working on stuff. And at that time, Marla was doing a lot of breeding. And so we were keeping yards, we were managing bee yards that had genetic stock that she was using for that breeding program. So the hygienic bee line that Marla created was something we were helping manage. So, any graduate student work and any research that was happening in the lab and any beehives that were being managed as part of experiments, I was helping manage those.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just, kind of grunt work, and even mowing grass and that kind of thing. So.
So what's the superorganism of a bee lab like?
Sorry.
I imagine the image of being, the worker bee for a situation in which Marla is the queen.
Right.
It has to have occurred to everybody at some point in this enterprise.
I don't know, actually. I haven't really thought about our lab as a superorganism, but you are right in that it is. I think maybe I haven't because we had lab space all over this building, Our old facilities were over here where the Bell Museum, the new Bell Museum is. So we were kind of scattered, and now we are under one building. So we are working a little bit more, like it's a little more obvious. And she was able to hire a native bee professor too, Dr. Dan Carabo, who's hired a lot of grad students. So our lab is a busy place now, and it does feel a lot more like a superorganism.
Well, how is it, that lab tech role, do you honestly feel like you're part of research, or do you feel like you're sort of an upgraded janitor who happens to be, associated with the research thing as opposed to, let's say, the gym?
Yeah, and as a coworker who is a postdoc in the lab said to me the other day, said the world needs ditch diggers too. And I firmly believe that, and I don't mind digging a ditch, because we do need ditch diggers. But
how are your relations with the research projects? How much do you know about what's going on? What's the dialogue like there?
We have lab meetings regularly, and a lot of emails go out with current papers to read and what people are working on, what people need help with. A lot of times, if there's data to be taken, a crew can go out, and I'll learn about what's happening just by being able to be there on that day when they're taking a lot of data. With B Squad, I get to be part of a lot of decision making there. And the overall lab, there's a lot of information sharing. There's a lot of people, I'm sorry, I have such a tickle in my throat.
Take your time.
Well, there's a seminars every week, and the grad students are often giving practice talks. So there's a lot of opportunities for everybody, including myself, to be part of the real research and to understand what's going on and to be part of discussions. When grad students are working towards their degree, a lot of times they'll present what they're working on, and we're all invited to those meetings, and a lot of questions get asked, a lot of suggestions get made. It's really collaborative. So even though I'm not like in a degree seeking program right now, I do feel always part of the research that's going on.
Yeah. So it isn't a particularly hierarchical place.
It's not, and actually, I actually talked to Marla this summer about wanting to further my education, because now that we are all under one building, I've realized that I have some holes in my knowledge, and so I was interested in taking an insect ecology class, and she suggested that I just take insect biology, which I hadn't taken, and it's a lot of review for me, but I'm learning a lot, and so I'm taking a class this fall. And there's two other grad students that are taking it, and then another coworker. So there's actually 4 of us in the lab that are taking this class. It's been really fun.
So this is fascinating. It's like the line between serious graduate students and researchers and lab techs is not very firm at all.
Yeah.
And there's every possibility that someone might, learn more and more about bees just in the course of this kind of interaction.
Yeah.
And eventually jump the fence and go research bees.
Yep.
Does that happen much?
I think it does. Clara, who works in the office here,
Yeah.
she also works for B Squad.
Mm-hmm.
But she's got some really great organizational skills, so she ended up getting hired here in the office too. So it's nice we have an in with somebody in the office 2 days a week. She's up here.
I shudder to think what it would be like to have somebody in a bee research lab with bad organizational skills. It would be like, betraying the hive or something.
How organized. Well, we're not born with that innate knowledge or anything, so.
Yeah, but you've been hanging around with bees all these years.
Yeah, that's true. But they also just do the task at hand. You know, if a job needs to be done, that's just what they do. And I think in a lot of ways that's how I moved through life for a while. When I was home with kids, it would be like, okay, this needs to be done. This child needs tending. This needs to be done, you know. I wouldn't necessarily have a strict list that I stuck to every day or goals. It was more reacting to my environment in a way. And I feel like honeybees can do that too, you know.
But you're aspiring to something that seems a little different from the bee model, which is being a conscious worker, a worker who knows what how the puzzle fits together.
That's true. That's true.
And that's interesting.
Yeah, I really believe in the work that the lab is doing. So that's a big part of my motivation, is just wanting to support it.
Well, since we opened up the floor for a commercial, can you give one? What is so great about the work that the lab is doing, and why should the million people who are riveted to their television sets right now, vote for continued funding for the Bee Lab?
Well, honeybees specifically have been a really good ambassador for insects in recent years. You know, they've been really trendy. They resonate with people. A lot of people, so I've been keeping bees for 20 years, and I get the conversation with people that, oh, my great uncle kept bees, or my grandpa kept bees. And I've heard that so many times from people, and I know they're not making it up. So there's this like longing for that kind of a lifestyle where people do keep bees, so I think there's a lot, we've been keeping bees for thousands and thousands of years. And so it's intrinsic to our humanity for a lot of people. It's just part of who we are. And so I think there's that calling, and they make a really good ambassador. So anyway, honeybees make just a phenomenal ambassador for all insects. So if honeybees are in trouble, a lot of insects are in trouble. So we've been kind of just using using honeybees as an ambassador, really, for other insects and other native bees, other native pollinators. And the University of Minnesota's Bee Lab is unusual in the fact that we study honeybees, but we also study native bees and native pollinators. So it's there's other good research going on with honeybees around the world, but as far as a bee lab, it's a unique place that works with honeybees and native bees all under one roof, that we see both as equally important, and both as supporting each other. The work that we do for honeybees is hand in hand with work that other people in the lab are doing for native bees as well.
So I'm going to get up to speed here. Honeybees are immigrants?
Yes, honeybees are not native to the Americas.
They flew over the wall. Okay.
Yep. They flew over the wall. Yep.
And what's what are the differences between honeybees and native bees?
Well, most of the honeybees that people keep here in the U.S. are from European stock, and they were brought over, by European settlers hundreds of years ago, and they've done really well. In Minnesota, there's about 425 other native bees, so there's a lot of different kinds of native bees to know and talk about and learn about and protect. And there's a little bit of competition, sometimes for resources, but by and large, if a honeybee colony can thrive somewhere, then native bees can thrive somewhere too. And with our industrialized ag, with large-scale agriculture, our native bee population is just not large enough to pollinate all the food that we need. So that's why so many people keep honeybees, and it's mostly for pollination. People, industrial or commercial beekeepers, are making their livelihood primarily off of pollination services, not off of honey sales. Americans just don't eat that much honey compared to other countries. So anybody keeping bees for a living is making most of their income through pollination. So we have a lot of migratory beekeepers. They winter all over the South in California, and then a lot of them come back to North Dakota and Minnesota in the summertime.
So, just to ask the world's ultimate dumb question, the things that aren't called honeybees, do they make honey?
Some bumblebees make a little bit of honey, which is just drying down nectar that they've collected from flowers, but they don't store it in the same way that honeybees do. Honeybees, we've been breeding bees for honey production for a long time, so they don't have any innate knowledge that tells them to stop making honey. So as long as there's nectar flow, as long as there's flowers blooming, they're going to collect nectar and store it. And to store it, they dry it down and cap it over. So they're pretty much the only ones. I think there might be some ants that turn some nectar into some nectar stores. I think there's a couple different ways, but
honey ants are not going to become a thing anytime soon.
no, they're not.
So, without European bees, we wouldn't have a bee industry. We wouldn't have honey. Is that right?
Well, there's some Asian bees and some African bees too, and people might have imported those, and that's what the killer bees were a hybrid between European bee and African bees, and that was, I don't know if you know that story.
Little of it.
Yeah, so that was good research gone bad.
But the basic thing is there are some genes floating around in Asia and Africa that tell the bee not to stop making honey when it stops making sense to make honey.
Yeah.
And so you can get some from Africa and Asia that will keep doing it in just that sort of same way.
Yeah.
But most of them are European.
Yeah.
And we don't have anything with that genetic peculiarity that's native to North America.
No,
Okay.
we don't.
Score one for immigrants.
Uh-huh.
And so you get to answer I'll be doing a bunch of interviews, but you get to answer the question that everybody will want the answer to. Do we know what's endangering all these bees?
It's a combination of things. It's a web of things that are interacting. One of the major forces is a parasitic mite called the varroa mite, and that originated on an Asian honeybee, and it jumped species. The European honeybee doesn't have the defenses that the original host had. So this varroa mite is pretty large compared to the bee's size. It feeds on the fat bodies, and it vectors other diseases. So if it jumps from one bee to another, it can bring along a virus. And it first appeared in the U.S. in the 80s. Wasn't a big problem for the first 15 years or so, but the last 10 years or more, it's been really devastating. Bees, they have some natural defenses, some colonies can withstand mites a little better than others. I don't need to go into it, but then there's other things, there's other factors as far as general bee health and general bee health decline. But the varroa mite is a big one. Another one is just lack of nutrition in the environment. Honeybees that are kept commercially, a lot of times are shipped all around from one single source crop to another. And so a lot of times they don't have a big diversity of pollen sources and nectar sources for their food. So nutrition's huge. We mow our side dishes and burn them, and our, all the, telephone lines and electrical lines, all those that could be bee forage are sprayed and burned and mowed, and we have so many monoculture farms that just are general nutrition for honeybees and any native native bees as well. Just have very little nutrition. So that's a big one. Just like with people, if we had poor nutrition, it sort of sets you up for failure in a lot of other ways. There's new viruses on the disease on the scene, and a lot of them we don't even know about. And then pesticides too are on the list. A lot of pesticide use with industrial ag, you know, and some of them we know how it works, and some of them we don't, and some of them stick around and they get put in the beeswax and they remain in the comb, and they can affect our bees long term if they bring it back in the hive. So a lot of these things, if you have poor nutrition, you've got this virus, and then you're exposed to a little bit of pesticide, all those three things might make you get disoriented and not find your way back to your hive, say, or make you a poor worker and not able to create brood food for the developing bees. There's a whole bunch of ways all those factors can interact in the health of an individual bee or a colony on the colony level.
So I can imagine two lines of approach to this, and probably there are more. I mean, one is to try to fix, you know, the environment somehow, try to keep the mites from jumping where you don't want them to jump, and try to get there to be more nutrition. The other is to fool around with the bee, with the bee genetics. What's going on there? Which route are they doing? Both of those?
I think all those things too. Actually, Marla is starting up breeding again. Her breeding, she kind of gave her breeding stock out to the commercial world. So a lot of that hygienic line and the hygienic line that she was developing in the 80s and 90s were bees that were shown to have natural defenses against pests and diseases. Bees that would remove dead brood, clean out the hives, so they were hygienic. They kept their hives cleaner, and they tended to be healthier. So that line she pretty much gave out to the commercial world so that people could use it. But she's going to start breeding again. And there are a lot of bee breeders. There's people, you know, queen producers and bee breeders in California and Hawaii. They're doing genetic, you know, they're selecting for certain behaviors and certain traits. I think Monsanto is doing genetic work with bees, and I'm sure they would like to hold the patent on the only bee that can survive a chemical blast. I'm sure there's ways you could profit off of it. So I know Monsanto has been doing genetic work on bees as well.
So Marla, in principle, could have patented the lines she sent out?
That's a good question, and I might be answering it wrong. I don't think she patented it.
But you could have. I mean, it's the sort of thing
like a Honeycrisp. I don't know.
Like the Honeycrisp apple. That's a question for somebody who's tried to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but this is just the way you breed cows and, you know, sheep and horses. I mean, this is selective breeding.
Yeah.
Are people fooling around at the gene level?
I don't know.
Another question to file, because I should think it would go very fast if you have essentially one egg layer.
Right.
If you know what to snip out and put in.
Right.
That's interesting. Well, now you started out talking about being in the lab, and then there was the interruption for the family.
Mm-hmm.
And when you came back, it sounded as if your job had shifted to more kind of extension, public relations, public information. So what do you do now?
Well, that first summer I went back, it was Marla had been wanting to start Bee Squad for a while. And so that first summer I came back, we had one customer. And then the second summer we really kind of launched it. So I pretty much exclusively work for the Bee Squad part of the lab. And every day is completely different. It depends on the day. Sometimes I'm teaching a class about wintering to some hobby beekeepers out at the Arboretum, or we have a lot of mentoring classes for folks. And a lot of days I'm just managing hives for people. So we have a lot of private customers that say they want to have bees or they've thought about keeping bees, didn't know how to, couldn't figure out how to do it. And so they hire us kind of like a gardener. So the equipment is theirs, the bees are theirs. At the end of the year, we pull the honey and extract it and give it back to them. The honey is theirs. So a lot of my days, I'm just managing hives for people. And then we also have corporate customers. So we keep bees for 3M and Boston Scientific, Radisson Blue Hotel out at the Mall of America. We've got them on their roof. And the Minneapolis Institute of Arts, we've got them on their roof. And so those companies can interact with us and use their relationship with us in a lot of different ways. And we don't really care how they use that relationship, as long as, you know, they can brag about supporting good research at the university and say this, you know, this is what we do. And or they can actually do outreach with their employees or with their customers, whoever they serve, and doing some education around pollinators or restoring native habitat to their lawns, or, you know, all different ways. And we found that when you do get a company engaged, like a larger company like Boston Scientific, it's a phenomenal way to reach a lot of people in a very short amount of time. When we put bees on campuses, on corporate campuses, immediately people feel ownership and protection over that. Sorry. People feel great ownership over their bees, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard the question, how are our bees? And people are worried, and they really want to help them, and so suddenly that whole campus is, their goal is to have these bees thrive. And a lot of practices need to change when you've got, you know, acres and acres of mown grass that's being sprayed repeatedly to stay green. Suddenly, it's not as important to those employees that grass is green. It's more important that there's something for their bees to eat, and that their bees aren't being subjected to pesticides and herbicides and other things that they can control as a company. So that's been really great. And then it's also just a way when they have, you know, a lot of companies have like green teams, or they have like a health and wellness fair. And it's a really great way to talk to people about bees and the environment and food choices and supporting, you know, local growers and all those conversations that are so interconnected in, you know, returning our earth into something that we're caring for instead of something that we're using up.
And does this bring money into the university? I mean,
it does. Yeah, we've our goal is to be kind of a self-sustaining program. So, yeah.
So the education things would be like for fee.
Yeah,
things.
those are pretty reasonable. They're they're like a $20 fee for a mentoring class. And we sell them. I don't know our pricing right now, but you can buy like a package of 4 classes for the summer. And the Bee Lab has always had a lot of educational outreach. They teach 2 classes a year on beekeeping, a weekend course for people that wanted to get into beekeeping, and then queen rearing too. They have a queen rearing course every summer. Sorry. So the lab has always done a lot of education, and that predates Marla Spivak. That goes back to probably the 20s, I think, that they were doing beekeeping classes here out of the entomology department.
So is this, you know, metro-wide, or do you end up going on the road?
It is metro-wide. There's a couple exceptions. We've got, we're working with inmates with bees. So we put bees up on the Willow River Men's Prison, and then we're going to be putting them at the Shakopee Women's Prison this next spring. So I have been up to Willow River to deliver some bees. We have a fellow that worked for us when he was an undergrad here, who lives up near Duluth, and so he's running that program. But technically, we have some bees up there. And then we're going to be working with the Fond du Lac Community College too. They have bees, but they're looking for some help in education and management. So we have a few remote sites like that. We've got one guy that works for us who's down in Rochester, and we've got a mentoring apiary down there, but the person running it lives in Rochester. But I was down there this spring delivering some bees, so they're part of our program. But most of the bees that we manage, like a season long, are all within the Twin Cities.
And, I mean, I've known some people who had bees kind of in their backyard.
Mm-hmm.
How do bees work in the city? I mean, there are a million questions
Yeah.
show up, like,
Yeah.
are your neighbors going to start worrying about getting stung, or worrying about the
Right.
swarm suddenly deciding to relocate to their chimney, or
Right. Yeah.
how does that work?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the city of Minneapolis 10 years ago, it was illegal to keep bees. And now the permitting process is really loose. They put bees on top of City Hall and realized they were going to have to get like 4,000 or 5,000 signatures. And so they just changed the rules so that you don't need all those signatures within, I think it was like within like 200 feet of your hive, you had to have like 80% of the signatures of people approving it, kind of thing. And these were like, the old rules were from the Depression, I think, when people were keeping goats in apartments and stuff, and they put a kibosh on that. So some of those rules were really old, and they updated them, but now it's really easy to get a permit and keep bees in the city. And it's a mixed bag because there actually is a lot of good forage in cities, and we found that certain pockets of the suburbs, just there's not much going on. There's not a lot of diversity. You might have some trees in the spring that are blooming, but the nectar sources really dry up. So it's actually given us a really good idea of where good places for bees are in the Twin Cities. And in Minneapolis and St. Paul, there's a surprising amount of forage. I think there's a variety of gardens and a lot of different trees. People plant a lot of different ornamental trees, and our boulevard trees are getting more diverse. I mean, it can be a really sneaky way to get bees into areas where there is good forage. Some of the outstate bees really struggle when they're in these monoculture systems, and it's corn and soybeans, and side ditches that have all been mowed. There's nothing. So in some places in Minneapolis, we've got somebody out in just one of our like consistently best honey producers is like 58th and 13th Avenue. No, I shouldn't. But it's like, South Minneapolis, and they just produce a ton of honey there. And, we put bees 5 years ago out at the Horst Reschelbacher farm in Osceola, Wisconsin. And the first couple of years, those bees just struggled. And we were just shocked. We were like, well, this is Osceola. This will be a beautiful place. And it was like, actually, there wasn't a lot of forage. It hadn't been managed. He was growing some roses. I mean, it hadn't been mismanaged. I don't want to give that kind of an idea, but there was goldenrod, but it wasn't a great kind of goldenrod. It was the kind that the bees don't prefer. It's not a great nectar source. And they just really struggled until we made an effort and planted forage for the bees. Now they're doing great, but it took a couple years of planting stuff for them to forage on. They'll travel up to 5 miles, but usually within a couple miles is where they go for their forage. And so in the city, it's actually surprisingly good. The drawback to keeping bees in the city is now it's become so popular, and a lot of people are keeping bees, and a lot of people are doing it without any education behind what they're doing. I remember about 4 years ago, I was in that hardware store on 28th and Hennepin, and they had a little end cap thing, and it had some beekeeping equipment, sort of random, not everything you'd need, but all the packaging was labeled "just add bees," and it was just, it's like, oh no, that's like, you don't just buy a goat and tie it up to a stick in your backyard. You have to know something about the animal. You have to have a management plan, have some education behind how to care for it. But I think sometimes people see it maybe just as they're insects, and so, there's a disconnect there. But they're kind of a domesticated animal, the way that we bred them and have them, and especially now with pests and diseases, you really have to manage them. And mites are so present in every colony. If you're keeping bees, you're keeping mites, and we have a lot of beekeepers that don't believe that. So, and they spread from colony to colony. So if that's the one drawback, and if you're in in an urban area that beekeeping has become popular, and you're bound to be within a few miles of somebody that is probably not managing their hive very well, and it puts your hive at risk.
Yeah. So I suppose there'd be an argument for leaving it to the professionals, people who know how to do it and who aren't going to produce some pocket of infection.
Yeah,
All the rest.
or just get educated. Just get educated. And we, here we are really lucky. The university is, really great for educating people. And there's, I've met people from different urban areas that they don't have the resources that beekeepers would have here. And there's a lot of resources for beekeepers here. Mm-hmm.
So just the last question,
Your own progress was from the dream of the apple orchard artwork to
Yeah.
messing around with bees to maybe messing around with people who mess around with bees.
Yeah.
Sort of elementary teaching
Uh-huh.
/ bee.
Yeah.
So you got a nice long career in front of you. Where's it going?
I don't know. I would love to continue working for the lab, and learning and being a part of the good research that happens there. I've toyed with possibly an advanced degree of some kind, and I don't know if I'll ever do it, and I don't think that feeling will ever go away just because I'm around people that are in advanced degree programs all the time. So it's hard for me not to think about it in that way. But
Is the dream of some place as a work of art, is that still alive? I can imagine, replacing the apple trees with beehives.
right.
I interviewed a guy who was the second son of a greenhouse dynasty in Austria.
Uh-huh.
And he'd been hurt in the war and was in some ways limited. And his thing was producing the best honey in a fairly big piece of Austria. But he had the greenhouse. He had, acres of flowers to send his bees to.
Right.
Can you imagine a place like that for yourself?
I don't think so. I don't think I need to own any place. I worry more just about the planet as a whole. I'd like to make a difference. More large scale.
And do you think this getting bees on the top of City Hall and into the corporate the corporate grounds and stuff like that, does that seem promising to you?
I think if it's done right, I think, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. There's mistakes that people can make in doing that, and I think mistakes probably have been made. So I think that really to heal our planet, though, everybody needs to be engaged on some level and make some changes. And I think if we're honest about what we're seeing and doing, it can really make a difference.
Thank you.